In 1943, theologian, professor, minister, and dean of the chapel at Howard University, the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, received a letter from a colleague in the Presbyterian Church. At the time, Thurman was already nationally recognized as a public speaker and Christian theologian. In the 1930s, he had been invited as one of a 4-member African-American delegation of the American Christian Student Movement, chosen to travel to India to meet Mahatma Gandhi and engage in cross-cultural religious dialogue. At Howard University, Dr. Thurman taught theology, ethics, and ministry to students while also maintaining a rigorous speaking schedule and writing books. So, as writer Paul Harvey tells us the story in Boone, California, when Dr. Thurman received that letter from Reverend Alfred Fisk of San Francisco State University asking if he knew of a part-time divinity student who might help start an interracial congregation in San Francisco, Dr. Thurman didn't initially consider the opportunity for himself. However, Thurman had grown restless with his role at Howard University, and he could feel something in his spirit calling him forwards towards a new adventure. During his time in India, a decade earlier, Thurman had had a mystical experience. In his book, Footprints of a Dream, Dr. Thurman tells the story of having a vision as he entered the Khyber Pass with his wife, Sue. Thurman watched the pass narrow into Afghanistan, twisting back and forth through the mountains with people and animals and goods traveling along this ancient roadway as they had for thousands of years, bringing ideas and materials and human beings back and forth between worlds. In Footprints of a Dream, Thurman wrote, "All that we had seen and felt in India seemed to be brought miraculously into focus. We saw clearly what we must do somehow when we returned to America. We knew we must test whether a religious fellowship could be developed in America that was capable of cutting across all racial barriers with a carryover into the common life, a fellowship that would alter the behavior patterns of those who were involved in it. It became imperative now," Dr. Thurman writes, "to find out if experiences of spiritual unity among people could be more compelling than the experiences that divided them." Back at Howard University 10 years later, as he considered Reverend Fisk's letter, Dr. Thurman began to wonder whether this was the opportunity towards which he felt his life had been moving. Dr. Thurman wrote Fisk back and said that actually he would like to begin such a church with Reverend Fisk. They exchanged ideas, and by 1944, Dr. Thurman and his wife were packed up and on their way to San Francisco to found the first intentionally interracial, interdenominational church in the United States. Dr. Thurman was a mystic who believed that the purpose of church is to bring people before the holy, to offer them time and place set apart to bring their whole selves into the presence of the sacred. Thurman believed that the work of church is to inspire, to reconnect the human being with that sacred spark within, and to recognize that sacred spark in other human beings, and to restore the commitment to sacred and right relationship among them. Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman and Reverend Alfred Fisk founded the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in 1944 to see if the practice of being in the presence of the holy, of experiencing the aliveness of the holy within, would give human beings the capacity to see the holy in one another, so much so that they would be able to overcome the stories and the fears and the prejudices they had against one another in racialized America, to see if knowing the holy within and connecting to the holy in another could create real connections across the differences of their lives. In his essay, Circles, Ralph Waldo Emerson uses circles as a metaphor for understanding nature, human consciousness, and reality. Emerson wrote, "Our life is an apprenticeship to the truth that around every circle another can be drawn. The eye is the first circle. The horizon which it forms is the second. And then throughout nature, this primary figure is repeated without end." That first circle, the I, is the person, the self, the one who perceives. Emerson says that each person is the center of the set of their own circles. And it is from within these centers of ourselves that we have a series of circles of perception out onto the world. So if I am here in my center and you are there in your center, we may be able to perceive one another if our lives and our circles overlap, though we may or may not be able to see past one another's circles of perception to the center. We may simply see an outer circle of the other perceiving self. The edge of the horizon, that second circle, the edge of the horizon that the eye can see, is the extent of what a person can observe from the vantage point of themselves. That's the second circle, what I can possibly know. But reality doesn't stop at the edge of the horizon of what I can see. Rather, reality keeps going without end. That is the third and fourth and infinite number of circles to which Emerson refers. There's always another horizon beyond our initial understanding. There's always another circle beyond my set of circles. As we grow, we expand our circles and expand our consciousness, drawing larger and larger circles of perception and understanding. In every direction, we can perceive and grow further, identifying new horizons and keep developing our precious minds. What is the purpose of the human mind? What is the purpose of the human life? What is the purpose of church? In Unitarian Universalism, We have a variety of different beliefs about God, but we come together in church with a shared belief that human life is sacred, that each and every individual human being is inherently worthy and sacred. In a 2014 interview with Bill Moyer about her book of essays entitled When I Was a Child, I Read Books, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and essayist Marilynne Robinson exclaimed over the magnificence of the human being. She said, "The human brain is the most complex object known to exist in the universe. Science says this. If the most exquisite expression of cosmic reality is the human brain, the human mind, then this is a thing to acknowledge, something to honor." She went on to say, if there's an economy in reality, then it's an enormous extravagance that we are what we are. There's something very excessive about human beings. We are brilliant beyond any imaginable use. We are excessive in the human mind. Robinson writes in her book that it is our ethical duty to honor the beauty and the brilliance of human beings by honoring one another truly and deeply, despite all of our differences, honoring one another by resisting the temptations of fear and greed, and instead truly respecting one another's sacred humanity and extravagant brilliance. Dr. Thurman believed that church was where we would practice this honoring, that church could be the nexus of healing the deep wound of race in the United States, because church is where we will tap into the sacred within ourselves and in a shared spiritual experience, learn to truly honor the sacred in one another. In church, we seek to build community across differences of age and race and income and history and body and experience. We are a universalist church. Dr. Thurman was a universalist theologian, and as Unitarian Universalists, our theology is that all human beings are sacred, worthy, and beloved. That is the grounding of our understanding of how we build real relationships across difference. But belief, that ground of understanding, and practice need to go hand in hand. We must not only know that human beings are inherently worthy, we must learn how to live like it. Church is as much for practice as it is for belief. We come back to it to live into our values, which frankly are easier to hold than they are to enact in our daily lives. Living our values is the human challenge that requires practice and return again. Church is for connecting with the divine and for practicing being human. It's for remembering our values, for reconnecting to the most high hopes and dreams we have for ourselves and for the world, and then for learning how to live them. These purposes of church are timeless. They were needed in 1944 and 1994, and especially today, when the world is struggling, honestly, to honor human dignity and truth and sacred respect for life. A respect for life that is a higher priority than the economy, that is a higher priority than fear or despair. One of the ways that we practice living into our values in church is through equitable giving. That might sound crass to talk specifically about finances in terms of our values, but it's a real practical way that we live out our values. In church, we share the financial responsibility for our congregation among our members. We don't have required giving or dues. Rather, we leave it up to you, our members and friends and community, to determine what it is that you want to give, what it is that it makes sense in your financial life to give, and what part you are going to play in creating equitable conditions in the shared responsibility for the finances of this community. We don't know what it is equitable for you to give. Only you know your finances and your capacity. We can tell you how much church costs and ask you to consider what your role is in creating this shared space for experiencing the sacred and living into our values. But we can't tell you what equitable giving means for you. In this winter's listen and learn discussions about our congregation's finances, which were attended by about 200 First Church folks, we learned that a lot of our folks don't know what equitable giving means in a real practical, just concrete numbers sort of a way. So I'm going to talk openly today about real costs, not with the intention that anyone should feel guilty, but simply for transparency and clarity, so more of our members have a window into our congregation's finances and might have a deeper understanding of what an equitable share of the costs of church means in a concrete sense. So it currently costs about $1,625 per person per year to produce the worship and the programs of our congregation. If you want to think about that in a monthly sense, if the year is too big, that's $135 per month for an individual or $270 per month for a couple. Now, those aren't dues. We know that our members and friends have different capacities to give, and some of our members are generously contributing significantly more than that, which we are so grateful for because it enables us to provide the ministry to all of our members and friends, regardless of financial circumstance. And that's so important. That's what equitable giving means. Please know that if you're giving less than what it costs to produce church, you are enthusiastically welcome in our congregation at whatever level you're able to give. But if you're able to contribute more, please consider doing so. Our annual congregational operating income is lower than our annual congregational operating expenses by about $150,000 a year. In addition, we're still not able to compensate our hardworking staff at the recommended rates for their positions. Almost 80% of our staff makes less than what the Unitarian Universalist Association recommends. While reserves and incredibly generous bequests have enabled us to continue to offer the current level of ministry that we provide, if we want to keep offering that same level of ministry in years to come, we need to close the gap between our operating income and our operating expenses over the next several years. So our pledge team, your fellow members, have set a goal for this year's pledge drive of all in. They are asking all of our members and friends, everyone who is experiencing this ministry and benefiting from it, to make a pledge. Just make a pledge this year at whatever level you can make it at, and say yes to the pledge team's invitation to join them for a pledge Zoom event. They have promised me it's going to be social, it's going to be fun, it's going to be connected to our values. You'll get to experience community and church. We are also asking all of our members and friends to consider increasing their giving to the church by 10% this year, or by $15 per person per month, whichever one of those is higher. If you're giving at a lower rate than what church costs, we also invite you to consider what equitable giving would mean for you in your particular specific life and financial circumstances. In the pledge drive materials you should have received in the mail this week, there's a chart. Of course, there's a chart. We're Unitarian Universalists. We have a chart. There's a chart in your pledge drive materials to help you understand the relationship between your financial situation and equitable giving. We ask that people who make more give more, and there are many of our members who do. For this, I just want to again say thank you. Your generosity, your sense of equity and integrity offers Unitarian Universalist ministry to people you may never know, people who are just as transformed by the grounding we share in love, universal human worthiness, and right relationship, regardless of varying financial situations. Members and friends of First Church, it has been a difficult year. And for some, it has been a difficult year financially. We need church, all of us, now more than ever. That's why we are asking those of you who can to give more, to make this the year you decide to give more to your community, so we can continue to offer this life-giving, transformative, values-based Unitarian Universalist ministry to everyone, regardless of financial circumstances. Church helps us feel the sacred and live the lives we say we want to live. Live those lives with our actions and our resources and our behavior. It's not an easy thing to do. Dr. Thurman created the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples as an experiment in the capacity of the experience of the sacred to overcome the differences between us. All Peoples is still going today, serving people of diverse races and faiths in San Francisco. Dr. Thurman also went on to mentor a generation of civil rights leaders, including the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to whom he taught Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. Love ripples out from our work in all directions, from the core of who we are, our center, like a drop of water making Emerson's infinite circles. Our actions ripple out from our thoughts, which ripple out from our core values. So First Church members, I want to ask you, what is it that is at your core? What is your life for? What values do you want to be part of the center of you that ripples out into the world? If you want to share them with the community, just type your values in the chat right now. What are those core values that you hold, that you want church to call you back to? What matters to you most? When we listened to our members a few years ago about your core values, you said that you cared about wonder and authentic connection and love and justice. And those are the core values at the center of our congregation: wonder, authentic connection, love, and justice. What among those calls to you most? If there's something that jumps out, type it in the chat now, share it with the community. This is what matters to me most. This is what is at my core. Church brings us back to our core, brings us back to our values. And then it asks us to practice living them. That's not an easy thing to do. The world, with its grit and grime, its daily details, and its bigger systems of oppression, presses on us, distracts us, asks us to pay attention to or buy that shiny new thing instead of living the way we have professed that we want to live. The world works on us every day. So we need to practice returning to our core, to our values, to our highest resolve, at least every week, and probably more often. This practice of return is what you are giving to when you make your pledge this season. You are giving to your own commitment to your values and asking us to bring you home to them every week. And I see some folks in the chat here. We've got reverence for life, love and giving to others, kindness and compassion, love and justice and community, love when confronted with hatred. These are some of our core values as a community. When you give to the church, you are giving to those values and asking to be brought home to them again and again. But you're also giving equitably to ministry to the community and to the world. You are giving to bringing even more people home to love, to kindness and compassion, to reverence for life. You are giving to bringing Unitarian Universalist values, the inherent worthiness of human beings, the brilliance of the mind, the sacredness of this beautiful earth out into the world. You are giving so that more people than just you can return every week to the ground of love, can return to the moments of our highest resolve, and can remember that to which our lives are committed. You are giving to us practicing, living those values out in the world. Thank you for your generosity. Amen, and may it be so.